The living room was dim, lit only by the fading orange glow from the window. Madison Hayes, 7 months pregnant, clutched her swollen belly as she tried to steady her breath. Her heart pounded, not from the baby's kicks, but from the heavy footsteps echoing down the hall. Jason Miller, her husband, reeked of alcohol and rage, his hands clenched into fists, his eyes wild with fury. "You think you can say no to me, Madison?" Jason's voice cracked like a whip. "I asked for money. Where is it?" Madison's voice trembled, almost a whisper. "Jason, we don't have any left. I saved it for the baby. Please, stop shouting, the neighbors." Before she could finish, Jason stormed into the room, his face twisted in anger. He grabbed a metal pipe he had been using earlier to fix the broken railing. With terrifying speed, he raised it high above his head. Madison gasped, stumbling backward, her body heavy with the weight of her unborn child. "You're useless," Jason roared, bringing the pipe down hard. The sound of metal striking bone echoed through the house. Madison screamed, collapsing to the floor as white-hot pain shot through her leg. Her vision blurred. She felt the sting of tears mixing with sweat. Every nerve in her body screamed for her to protect her unborn baby. She curled instinctively, holding her stomach with both arms as her leg throbbed in agony. Outside, the peaceful suburban neighborhood of Houston, Texas, remained quiet, unaware of the horror unfolding inside the Hayes home. A dog barked in the distance. Somewhere, a car door slammed. But inside, time slowed to a nightmare. Jason stood over Madison, his chest heaving. "Don't ever cross me again," he growled, lowering the pipe, ready to strike once more. Madison's mind raced. She thought of the baby, of survival. If he hit her stomach, it would be over. She forced herself to move, dragging her broken leg against the carpet, desperate to reach the phone on the coffee table. Every inch felt like a mile. Jason noticed. He kicked the table, sending the phone skidding across the floor out of reach. "You'll never leave me, Madison. Never," he hissed, his voice dripping with venom. Madison sobbed, clutching her belly tighter, praying for a miracle. She thought of her brother Michael, the one person who always promised to protect her. But Michael was far away, working his late shift as a police officer. There was no one here now. Jason raised the pipe again, his shadow falling over her trembling body. The baby shifted inside her as if sensing the danger. Madison squeezed her eyes shut, waiting for the final blow, her lips whispering a broken plea. But just as the pipe came down, a loud crash erupted from the front door. Heavy boots pounded against the hardwood floor, and a familiar voice bellowed with fury. "Get away from my sister, Jason," before the nightmare of bruises and broken bones. Madison Hayes once believed in love stories. She was the kind of woman who laughed easily, who carried warmth like sunlight, and who cared for others before herself. At 29, she was a dedicated nurse at a community clinic in Houston, known for holding her patients' hands a little longer, listening when no one else would. Life had not been perfect, but Madison made the best of it. She grew up in a small house with her older brother, Michael. Their father had left when they were young, so Michael stepped in as the protector of the family. Madison admired his courage when he joined the Marines, and later when he returned home to serve as a police officer. For years it was just the two of them and their mother. Madison promised herself she would one day build the kind of stable family they never had. That dream seemed to come true the night she met Jason Miller. He was charming then, handsome, confident, the kind of man who could light up a room. At a friend's barbecue, Jason had walked right up to her, offering her a plate of food and an easy smile. He asked about her work, her hobbies, her dreams. He made her feel seen in a way she had longed for. In the beginning, Jason brought flowers to her clinic, waited for her after late shifts, and told her she deserved to be treated like a queen. Madison, who had always cared for others, felt overwhelmed to finally be cared for. When he proposed after a year of dating, she said yes, through tears of joy, believing her life was falling into place. The wedding was small but beautiful. Madison wore a lace gown her mother helped her pick, and Jason whispered promises in her ear as they danced under fairy lights. "I'll protect you forever. You'll never have to be afraid," he had said. Madison believed every word, but promises can rot quickly. Within months of marriage, Jason's mask slipped. The first time he raised his voice, Madison thought it was stress. The first time he shoved her, he apologized with tears, saying it would never happen again. She wanted to believe him, so she forgave him. Each time, the cycle repeated: anger, violence, regret, gifts, and hollow apologies. By the time Madison discovered she was pregnant, the abuse had grown worse. She hid bruises beneath long sleeves at the clinic, smiled through tears when neighbors asked how she was doing, and told Michael everything was fine. She didn't want to burden her brother, who was already carrying the weight of protecting others every day as a police officer. But deep inside, Madison was breaking. Every night, she whispered to her unborn baby, promising she would find a way to keep them safe. She prayed Jason would change, prayed the love she once believed in would return. Yet each morning, she woke to a harsher reality. The man she married was not her savior. He was her tormentor. And now, lying on the floor with her leg shattered, Madison knew she had been wrong all along. The Jason who once swore to protect her had become the very monster she feared most. But what Jason didn't know was that Madison wasn't alone anymore. Her brother had just come home. The Hayes home sat in a quiet Houston suburb, lined with oak trees and manicured lawns. From the outside, it looked like the perfect place to raise a family. Neighbors waved to each other while mowing their lawns, children rode bicycles in the cul-de-sac, and dogs barked behind white picket fences. On weekends, families gathered for backyard barbecues, laughter filling the air. To anyone driving past, the little beige one-story house on Elmwood Drive seemed ordinary, safe, even welcoming. But behind its walls, the truth was much darker. Madison's house had become a prison. The curtains stayed drawn most of the day, keeping out both sunlight and curious glances. The flower beds she once tended with pride were overgrown with weeds. The porch light that used to shine warmly each night often stayed off, casting the house into shadows. Neighbors whispered sometimes, wondering why Madison rarely joined block parties anymore, or why Jason's truck came and went at odd hours. Inside, the contrast was even sharper. The living room smelled faintly of stale beer and cigarette smoke. Empty bottles cluttered the counter, and bills stacked unopened on the kitchen table. The walls, once decorated with framed wedding photos and Madison's cheerful touch, now seemed cold. A crack in the drywall from one of Jason's violent outbursts remained unpatched, a silent witness to the chaos. Madison had tried to keep some normalcy. She folded baby clothes carefully in the nursery, painted the walls a soft pastel blue, and placed a rocking chair by the window. That room was her sanctuary, the only place where she could dream of a future filled with laughter and innocence. But each time Jason stormed through the door, even the nursery felt fragile, like a bubble about to burst. The neighborhood itself added to the painful contrast. On the same street, a young couple often pushed their newborn in a stroller, their joy evident in every smile. Madison would watch from the window, one hand on her belly, and wonder if her child would ever know such peace. She longed for safety, for the kind of life she thought she had chosen when she married Jason. Instead, she found herself locked in fear, praying no one outside would hear the shouting or the crashes that echoed through the walls. Michael knew something was wrong, though Madison kept assuring him everything was fine. As a police officer, he had seen the signs in other families: the avoidance, the excuses, the long sleeves in summer. Each time he visited, Madison smiled too brightly, and Jason stayed just out of reach, watching like a hawk. The house gave Michael a bad feeling, though he didn't yet know how deep the darkness inside had grown. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the suburban street grew quiet, the perfect picture cracked wide open. Neighbors setting down their dinner forks froze when they heard Madison's scream pierce the stillness. Curtains twitched as eyes peeked out, confusion spreading. The house that looked so ordinary from the outside was now a stage for a nightmare no one could ignore. And just as the silence broke, heavy boots thundered inside. Michael had arrived. Jason Miller was not always a monster, at least not on the surface. When Madison first met him, he was the kind of man who drew people in. Confident smile, easy laughter, strong hands that made her feel secure. But behind that charm was a dangerous hunger he never revealed until it was too late. Jason grew up in Houston too, the son of a factory worker who drowned his failures in whiskey. Violence was a language Jason learned early, watching his father throw bottles against the wall and his mother cover bruises with makeup. Instead of breaking the cycle, Jason carried it with him. He hid it well at first, masking the anger with quick wit and a charming grin. Madison fell for that mask, not realizing the darkness behind it. The spiral began with money. Jason loved the thrill of gambling. At first it was small, weekend poker games with friends, the occasional trip to a casino. Madison thought it was harmless fun, but soon the games turned into obsession. He spent nights at underground poker houses, chasing wins that never lasted. When the losses piled up, so did his temper. Drinking followed. Jason found comfort at the bottom of a bottle, and the man who once whispered sweet promises began slurring insults instead. He blamed Madison for his failures, accusing her of not supporting him enough, of not understanding his struggles. Each insult chipped away at the foundation of their marriage. Then came the violence. The first shove was followed by a tearful apology. The first slap came with flowers the next day. Madison wanted to believe him when he said it would never happen again. But Jason was a master of the cycle. Rage, regret, gifts, repeat. And with each turn, the violence grew worse. By the time Madison was pregnant, Jason was drowning in debt. Loan sharks began calling, threatening, demanding payment. Jason turned his fury on the only person within reach, Madison. He demanded money from her savings, money she had carefully set aside for the baby's future. When she refused, he saw it not as protection, but as betrayal. Jason's arrogance made him believe he still had control. To the outside world, he was a hard-working husband, maybe a little rough around the edges, but nothing more. He fooled neighbors with quick nods and short conversations. He even charmed Madison's mother during Sunday dinners. But behind closed doors, he was a tyrant, ruling the house with fists and fear. What Jason didn't realize was that the walls were closing in. His debts were deeper than he admitted, his mistress was losing patience with his empty promises, and Madison, though terrified, was beginning to see through the lies. Jason thought he had broken her, but deep inside, Madison's spirit remained unshattered. That night, as he stood with a pipe in his hand, Jason believed he still held all the power. But outside, headlights were pulling into the driveway. Someone who had no fear of him was about to walk through the door. And when Jason turned toward the sound, his worst nightmare was standing there. Michael, the brother who would never forgive. The crash of the front door echoed like thunder through the quiet suburban street. Michael Hayes, his police badge glinting under the porch light, stormed inside with fury burning in his eyes. He had heard his sister's screams from the driveway, screams that sliced through the evening air like sirens. He didn't even bother to knock. He knew something terrible was happening. The scene before him was worse than he could have imagined. Madison lay on the carpet, clutching her swollen belly with one hand while her other arm stretched weakly toward the phone. Her leg bent at an unnatural angle, her face pale from shock. Tears streaked down her cheeks as she struggled to breathe through the pain. Jason stood over her, still gripping the metal pipe, his chest heaving with rage. He froze when he saw Michael, but only for a moment. His jaw tightened and he sneered. "This isn't your business, Michael. Stay out of it." Michael's blood boiled. "Not my business? She's my sister. She's 7 months pregnant, Jason. What the hell have you done?" His voice thundered through the house, shaking the walls more than Jason's violence ever had. Outside, the neighborhood was stirring. The scream, the crash, the shouting, it had drawn attention. Curtains parted as neighbors peeked from their windows. A woman across the street stepped onto her porch, phone in hand, whispering urgently into it. Another neighbor pulled his children back inside, his face pale as he realized the truth. The Hayes home was no safe haven. Jason tried to regain control, his voice dripping with arrogance. "She belongs to me. She doesn't get to run to you every time she doesn't like the rules. Put your badge away and get out of my house." Michael's hand twitched toward his holster, but he held back. He wasn't here in uniform, he was here as a brother. His eyes locked on Madison, who lay trembling, her lips mouthing words he could barely hear. "Help me." That was all he needed. Michael lunged forward, knocking the pipe from Jason's hand with a swift strike. The weapon clattered across the floor, landing near the doorway. Jason stumbled back, caught off guard by the ferocity of Michael's attack. For once, he wasn't the strongest man in the room. Madison sobbed in relief, reaching for her brother's arm as he knelt beside her. "It's okay, Maddie. I'm here now." "He's not going to hurt you anymore," Michael whispered, though his eyes never left Jason. The neighbors outside gathered closer, their whispers turning into gasps as shadows moved behind the thin curtains. They could see everything now. Jason's posture stiff with fury, Michael standing tall in defense of his sister, and Madison broken on the floor. One neighbor finally said what everyone else was thinking. "Should we call the cops?" The woman on her porch answered without hesitation. "They're already on their way." Jason's face twisted with panic for the first time. He looked at the growing crowd outside, at Michael's unyielding stance, and at Madison's terrified but determined eyes. For once, the walls of his house weren't protecting his secrets. And as the sound of sirens wailed faintly in the distance, Jason realized his world was about to come crashing down. 2. The flashing red and blue lights painted the quiet street as paramedics rushed into the Hayes home. Madison's sobs mixed with the wail of the siren as she was lifted carefully onto a stretcher. Her leg was twisted, her face pale, and her arms clutched her belly protectively. Michael held her hand the entire way out, his jaw clenched, fury still boiling beneath his calm exterior. "Stay with me, Maddie. I'm right here," he whispered, trying to steady her breathing. But Madison's eyes fluttered, tears slipping down her cheeks as fear swallowed her whole. The ride to the hospital felt endless. Every bump in the road sent sharp waves of pain through Madison's leg. She kept whispering to her unborn baby, "Please stay safe. Please don't leave me," over and over like a prayer. The paramedic reassured her, checking the baby's heartbeat with quick, practiced hands. "The baby's strong. Just focus on breathing, ma'am. We'll get you there." When they arrived, the emergency room burst into motion. Nurses rushed Madison into trauma care, cutting away her blood-stained jeans, stabilizing her leg, and hooking her up to monitors. Michael paced outside the curtain, fists clenched, every muscle in his body screaming to do more. He was a police officer, used to controlling situations, but tonight he felt helpless watching his sister in pain. Inside, Madison fought to stay awake. The bright lights, the sharp antiseptic smell, the rush of voices, it all felt distant, like she was floating away. Her mind flashed with images of Jason's rage, the pipe coming down, the betrayal in his eyes. She wanted to scream, but her voice was gone. All she could do was cry silently as the doctors worked around her. "Her vitals are stable," one nurse said, glancing at the monitor. "The baby's heart rate looks good. We'll need x-rays on that leg." Relief should have washed over Madison, but it didn't. Instead, a crushing wave of despair hit her. She had spent months convincing herself she could endure Jason's anger, that he would change for the baby. And now here she was, broken, humiliated, exposed in front of strangers. She felt weak, ashamed, and trapped in a nightmare with no escape. Michael finally stepped inside, crouching beside her bed. He took her trembling hand, his eyes softer now. "You don't have to be strong anymore, Maddie. You don't have to carry this alone. I'm not letting him hurt you again." Her lips quivered as she whispered, "I should have left sooner. I thought I could fix him. I thought he loved me." Michael shook his head firmly. "That man doesn't know love. But you're not alone anymore. I promise you, he's going to pay for everything he's done." Madison's tears spilled freely. She wanted to believe him, but fear lingered like a shadow. She closed her eyes, holding her stomach as the baby kicked gently, a reminder of the life she had to protect. For the first time, she admitted to herself what she had been denying for months. Jason wasn't just a mistake. He was a danger. And if she didn't find the courage to break free, this cycle would never end. But what Madison couldn't imagine was that her life was about to change forever, because someone unexpected was about to walk into her world. The sterile hallway of the hospital smelled faintly of disinfectant and coffee. Madison lay in her room, her legs stabilized in a heavy cast, the rhythmic beeping of monitors filling the silence. Michael had stepped out briefly to speak with detectives about Jason's arrest, leaving her alone with her thoughts. Exhaustion weighed her down, but sleep never came. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Jason's face twisted in rage. A soft knock at the door startled her. Madison turned her head, expecting another nurse, but instead, a tall man in a tailored navy suit stood in the doorway. His presence immediately filled the room. Not loud or overbearing, but calm, commanding, almost protective. His dark hair was neatly combed, his gray eyes sharp yet kind. "Sorry to intrude," he said gently. "The nurse mentioned you might need some extra support. I'm Alexander Reed." Madison frowned, confused. The name was familiar. Of course it was. Alexander Reed wasn't just anyone. He was one of Houston's most prominent businessmen, a billionaire in the tech world whose face often appeared on magazine covers and charity events. What was he doing here? Seeing her hesitation, Alexander stepped inside slowly. "I know this seems strange. I wasn't looking to bother you, but I happened to be here visiting a foundation project in the hospital. I overheard some of the staff talking about what happened. I couldn't walk away." His voice carried no judgment, only genuine concern. Madison shifted uncomfortably, tugging the blanket higher over her chest. "You shouldn't be here," she whispered, her voice raw. "I don't even know you." Alexander nodded respectfully. "You're right. But I know what it looks like when someone is carrying more than they should. And I can see it in your eyes. You've been fighting alone for far too long." His words pierced through her defenses, stirring emotions she didn't want to show. Tears filled Madison's eyes again, uninvited and unstoppable. She quickly looked away, embarrassed to cry in front of a stranger. Alexander didn't press. Instead, he pulled up a chair and sat quietly, giving her space. After a moment, he spoke again, softer this time. "I've seen broken families. My ex-wife left me years ago. Money doesn't shield you from pain, but what I've learned is this. You can't stay in the fire hoping it'll stop burning. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away." Madison's heart clenched. For months she had carried shame, believing she had failed by not fixing Jason. But here was a man, powerful beyond anything she could imagine, telling her that leaving wasn't weakness. It was survival. She studied him carefully. He wasn't pitying her. He wasn't trying to lecture her. He was offering something she hadn't felt in years: respect. Before she could respond, the door burst open again. Michael entered, still in his police uniform, eyes narrowing as he spotted Alexander. Protective as always, he barked. "Who are you, and why are you with my sister?" Alexander rose calmly, extending a hand. "Alexander Reed, I'm here because your sister deserves someone in her corner." Michael didn't shake his hand. He stared at the billionaire with suspicion, torn between gratitude and distrust. And in that charged moment, Madison realized her life was about to take a turn she never saw coming. The days following the attack blurred together. Madison remained in the hospital, her leg immobilized, her body healing slowly, while her mind wrestled with heavier wounds. Nurses came and went, checking her vitals, adjusting her medications, but every night she lay awake staring at the ceiling, haunted by Jason's shadow. Michael visited constantly, always hovering, always protective. He wanted to talk about charges, court hearings, restraining orders, but Madison's heart wasn't ready for legal battles. She was still just trying to breathe. Alexander Reed, however, was different. He visited quietly, never staying long, never pushing. Sometimes he brought flowers, nothing extravagant, just simple daisies. Sometimes he brought books or a smoothie the nurses approved of for her pregnancy. He never made grand gestures. Instead, he sat in the chair by her bed, speaking when she wanted to talk, staying silent when she didn't. Still, Madison kept her guard up. "Why are you here?" she asked one afternoon, her voice sharp with suspicion. "You don't even know me. Billionaires don't just show up for strangers in hospitals." Alexander leaned back, his gray eyes steady. "You're right. Most don't. But I'm not here because of your situation. I'm here because of you. The way you hold your baby when you're scared, the way you apologize to the nurses even while you're in pain, it says everything. You deserve someone to remind you you're worth protecting." His words unsettled her. No one had spoken to her that way in years. Jason's voice had drowned out her worth, making her believe she was weak, a failure. Could she really trust this man who appeared out of nowhere? Michael certainly didn't. He watched Alexander like a hawk, interrogating him with every chance he got. "What's your angle? You're rich, powerful, and used to getting what you want. Don't think for a second I'll let you take advantage of my sister." Alexander never flinched under Michael's glare. "I don't want anything from her," he replied calmly, "except the chance to remind her she's not alone." Despite herself, Madison felt her defenses soften. She noticed the small things, how Alexander always looked her in the eye, how he never touched her without asking, how he respected Michael's role instead of challenging it. Slowly, the fear that every man was another Jason began to fade, replaced by cautious hope. One evening, Madison confessed in a trembling voice, "I'm scared, Alexander. Not just of Jason, but of trusting anyone again. I can't make another mistake. My baby deserves better than that." Alexander nodded, his expression earnest. "Fear is proof that you care. But don't confuse Jason's cruelty with your failure. You loved the wrong man, Madison. That doesn't make you broken. It makes you human. And whoever has the privilege of standing beside you next will have to prove they're worthy." Tears welled in her eyes as she absorbed his words. For the first time, she didn't feel judged. She felt understood. But before she could answer, Michael walked in carrying papers. His face was grim, his voice heavy. "Maddie, we need to talk. Jason isn't done yet." And in that moment, Madison realized her nightmare wasn't over. The fight was only beginning. Jason Miller might have been dragged away in handcuffs that night, but prison walls didn't erase his anger. If anything, they sharpened it. From the holding cell, he made phone calls, his voice dripping with venom. To Madison, he left threatening messages before Michael had her number changed. To his so-called friends, he demanded they keep an eye on her. Even behind bars, Jason refused to let go of his control. Madison's days in the hospital grew tense. At first, she thought she could finally breathe, finally heal in peace. But then the letters started arriving. Sloppy handwriting, filled with rage, promising revenge. "You can't hide from me," one read. "That baby is mine, and you're nothing without me." Nurses found her trembling with the paper clenched in her hands, tears streaming down her face. Michael exploded when he saw them. "He's taunting you. He thinks he still owns you. But I swear, Maddie, I'll make sure he never lays a finger on you again." His protective instincts went into overdrive. He spoke with prosecutors, demanded restraining orders, and stationed officers near the hospital for extra security. Still, Madison couldn't shake the fear. Jason's shadow lingered, poisoning every quiet moment. One night, as Madison dozed lightly, her phone buzzed. The new number wasn't supposed to be known, but somehow Jason had gotten it. His voice snarled through the speaker. "You think you can run? You think that billionaire is going to save you? You're mine, Madison. You'll always be mine." She dropped the phone, her body shaking uncontrollably. Michael stormed into the room seconds later, grabbing the device and barking orders into his radio. Madison curled against the pillows, whispering, "Why won't he just stop? Why won't he let me go?" Alexander appeared shortly after, his calm presence cutting through the chaos. He sat by her bed, his hand resting lightly near hers. "Bullies thrive on fear," he said gently. "Jason knows he's losing control, so he's trying to scare you back into silence. Don't let him. You're stronger than he is." But Madison wasn't sure. Every threat pulled her back into the nightmare, convincing her she would never be free. She worried for her baby, for Michael, even for Alexander. What if Jason's rage reached them too? She couldn't bear the thought of dragging others into her storm. Michael, however, refused to back down. "He crossed the line the moment he touched you," he told her firmly. "And now, he's about to learn what happens when he threatens a cop's family." That night, Madison sat awake by the hospital window, staring out at the quiet city lights. Her heart longed for peace, for safety, for a future where her child would never know fear. But Jason's voice echoed in her ears like a curse. She whispered to her unborn baby, "I won't let him win. Not this time." What Madison didn't know was that Jason's desperation was about to push him into an even darker plan, one that could put everyone she loved in danger. Jason Miller had always believed he could control people with charm and intimidation. That belief extended beyond Madison. For months he had been entangled with another woman, Vanessa Price. She was younger, glamorous, and eager for the lifestyle Jason promised her. To Vanessa, Jason was the man who whispered dreams of luxury, a man who swore he would leave his boring wife and start a new life together. But Vanessa was not stupid. She had seen Jason's temper, the reckless gambling, the desperate phone calls to cover his debts. When news spread that Jason had been arrested for assaulting his pregnant wife, Vanessa's illusion shattered. She realized she wasn't the chosen one. She was just another pawn. At first, Vanessa ignored his calls from jail, but Jason was relentless. "Vanessa, baby, don't turn your back on me," he begged over the phone. "You're all I've got. I'll get out of this, I swear. Just get me some cash, hire me a lawyer. We'll run away together." Vanessa rolled her eyes, twirling a strand of her blonde hair as she listened. "Jason, you promised me yachts and diamonds. All I've gotten is cheap dinners and excuses. Now you're in jail, and the whole city knows you broke your wife's leg while she's carrying your child. Do you really think I want to be tied to that?" His tone shifted from pleading to threatening. "Don't forget what you owe me, Vanessa. You think you can just walk away? You're mine, just like Madison." That was his mistake. Vanessa hated being controlled, and Jason's arrogance was the final straw. If he thought he could scare her into loyalty, he was dead wrong. The next day, Vanessa made a bold move. She reached out to Michael Hayes. Meeting him in a quiet cafe near the courthouse, she slid into the booth opposite him, oversized sunglasses covering her face. Michael, suspicious but curious, leaned forward. "Why are you here?" Vanessa smirked. "Because I'm done with Jason, and I think you'll want to know what I know." She spilled everything: Jason's gambling debts, the hidden bank accounts, his violent rants about Madison, even his plan to run away with stolen money once he bled Madison dry. Michael listened carefully, his jaw tightening with every word. The more Vanessa revealed, the clearer the picture became. Jason wasn't just abusive. He was dangerous on a level Madison hadn't even realized. When Michael told Madison later that night, her heart shattered all over again. She had clung to the belief that somewhere, deep down, Jason once loved her. But Vanessa's words stripped that illusion away. Jason never loved her. He had only ever loved control, money, and his own ego. Madison wept in Michael's arms, whispering, "How could I have been so blind? He wasn't just cruel, he was planning to throw us away." Michael held her close, his voice firm. "You're not blind, Maddie. You're human. But now we know the truth. And with this truth, we can finally destroy him." What none of them knew, however, was that Jason had already guessed Vanessa's betrayal, and he was plotting his revenge from inside his cell. The walls of Harris County Jail were gray and unforgiving, but the storm inside Jason Miller was darker than any cell. He paced like a caged animal, fists clenching and unclenching, his mind spiraling with rage. Losing control was something Jason never tolerated. Yet here he was, stripped of power, humiliated, and abandoned. Every night, he replayed the scene in his head: Madison screaming, Michael barging in, the flashing red and blue lights. He remembered the neighbors' eyes staring at him as the police shoved him into the back of the cruiser. Shame boiled into fury. "She betrayed me," he muttered under his breath, his voice low and venomous. "She thinks she can walk away? Not a chance." At first, Jason convinced himself it was temporary. He would get out, smooth-talk the court, maybe even intimidate Madison into dropping charges. But reality hit hard when his lawyer visited. "The evidence against you is solid," the lawyer said bluntly. "Your wife's injuries, the neighbor's testimonies, your prior record of disorderly conduct, it doesn't look good." Jason slammed his fist against the table, making the lawyer flinch. "I'm not going down for this. She's my wife. She belongs to me." The lawyer gathered his papers, unimpressed. "She's not yours anymore, and if you keep acting like this, the jury will eat you alive." The words cut deeper than Jason expected. For the first time, he realized people weren't afraid of him anymore. His charm, his intimidation, it all crumbled within these concrete walls. Even Vanessa, the mistress who once clung to his promises, had betrayed him. He had overheard whispers from the guards. She had gone to Madison's brother. Jason's stomach twisted with rage. In the cafeteria, other inmates mocked him. "A tough guy who beats pregnant women? Real brave, Miller," one sneered. Jason lunged at him, but guards dragged him back before fists could fly. His reputation, once built on fear, had turned into ridicule. He was no longer the predator. He was prey to his own disgrace. Lying awake at night on his thin mattress, Jason's thoughts grew darker. He blamed Madison for everything. If only she had given him the money. If only she had stayed quiet. If only she hadn't called Michael. In his mind, Madison was the villain, not him. The idea of her moving on, raising his child without him, was unbearable. His obsession festered until it consumed him. One evening, during visitation hours, Jason's rage boiled over. He was denied a meeting with Madison. She refused to see him. The guard told him calmly, "She doesn't want contact." Jason erupted, slamming his fists against the glass. "She can't do this to me. She's mine. Do you hear me? Mine. His voice echoed through the room, startling even hardened inmates. But deep down, fear gnawed at him. For the first time, Jason felt the crushing weight of losing everything. His wife, his unborn child, his mistress, his freedom. The walls weren't just confining him, they were closing in, suffocating him with truth. He wasn't in control anymore. And when Jason received word that Madison wasn't just healing but finding comfort in another man's presence, his rage twisted into something even more dangerous. The hospital room that once felt cold and suffocating slowly began to change. Madison noticed it in the small details: fresh flowers on her nightstand, soft music playing from a portable speaker, and the steady presence of Alexander Reed. Unlike Jason, who brought chaos and fear, Alexander carried calm wherever he went. He never overwhelmed her. Instead, he showed up quietly, sometimes with a cup of tea, sometimes with a book he thought she might enjoy. One afternoon, he read aloud to her while she rested, his voice deep and steady. Madison found herself lulled into comfort, not by the story itself, but by the sense of safety that surrounded him. "You don't have to do this," Madison told him one evening, her voice shaky as she adjusted her hospital blanket. "I'm not your responsibility. I don't even know why you care." Alexander leaned forward, his elbows resting on his knees. "Because no one deserves what you went through. And because I see strength in you, Madison, even when you don't see it yourself. Sometimes people just need someone to stand beside them while they heal." The sincerity in his eyes unsettled her, but not in the way Jason's glare once did. This was different. Madison wasn't used to kindness without strings attached. For so long, love had meant control. Apologies followed by violence, empty promises. Now, with Alexander, it felt like something foreign, gentle, patient, safe. Michael noticed too. At first, he kept his guard up, suspicious of the billionaire who seemed too interested in his sister. But over time, even he had to admit Alexander's actions were genuine. One night, Michael found his sister laughing softly at a story Alexander told about his clumsy attempts to cook. It was the first time he had heard Madison laugh freely in months. "You haven't smiled like that in a long time," Michael said later when Alexander had stepped out. Madison blushed, brushing off his words. "I don't know what you're talking about." But deep down, she knew exactly what he meant. Alexander's presence wasn't just healing her, it was reminding her who she used to be before Jason's shadow took over her life. The Madison who dreamed of picnics, who wanted to decorate nurseries with bright colors, who believed love could be tender. Still, fear clung to her. "What if I'm too broken?" she confessed one evening as Alexander tucked a blanket around her. "What if I can't be the woman I used to be?" Alexander met her gaze with quiet conviction. "You're not broken, Madison. You're rebuilding. And sometimes, rebuilding makes us stronger than we ever were before." His words stayed with her long after he left that night. She placed her hand on her belly, whispering to her baby, maybe we'll be okay." For the first time, hope felt real, not like a distant dream. But outside the safety of the hospital walls, the world wasn't done testing her. Jason's obsession was growing, and Madison's fragile new beginnings were about to face their hardest trial yet. Because love may heal, but danger was already on its way back into her life. The cell was cold, but Jason Miller's mind burned with fury. Every hour he spent locked up only deepened his obsession. Madison was supposed to be his wife, his property. Yet now she was slipping further away, protected by her brother, and worse, finding comfort in another man. A billionaire, no less. Jason's pride couldn't handle it. The image of Madison smiling at someone else gnawed at him like acid. "She thinks she's safe," he muttered under his breath, pacing the narrow floor of his cell. "She thinks I'm finished, but she has no idea who she's dealing with." Word traveled fast in prison. Jason learned quickly how to buy favors. A cigarette here, a promise of cash there. Every debt he owed on the outside became leverage inside. He used what little influence he had left to gather information, to send messages beyond the walls. He still had contacts, people who owed him, people desperate enough to take his money. One night, sitting in the corner of the rec yard, Jason confided in another inmate, a wiry man with tattoos running up his neck. "I need someone to deliver a message," Jason said quietly. "I want her scared. I want her looking over her shoulder every second." The man smirked. "That'll cost you, but fear's easy to deliver." Jason grinned, though his eyes were wild. Money's not a problem. Not yet. He still had hidden accounts, scraps of cash Vanessa hadn't discovered. Enough to buy trouble, enough to make Madison feel his grip even from behind bars. Meanwhile, his phone calls to Vanessa grew venomous. She had betrayed him, sold him out to Michael. But Jason wasn't ready to let her go either. He threatened her, promised consequences. "If you think you can walk away, you're dead wrong. I'll drag you down with me." Vanessa laughed bitterly during one call. You're finished, Jason. Madison's stronger than you ever gave her credit for. And she's got people who actually care about her now. You'll rot in there, and no one will remember your name. Her words cut, but they also fueled his obsession. Jason wasn't going to be forgotten. He'd make sure of it. At night, he lay awake on his thin mattress, replaying his plans. Maybe he couldn't walk out of prison, but he could still strike fear. If Madison thought she could rebuild her life, if she thought she could move on with Alexander Reed, Jason would remind her that he was always lurking, always waiting. He whispered into the darkness, "She'll never escape me, not Madison, not the baby, not ever." And as he plotted, Jason's rage twisted into something more dangerous than before. This wasn't about love anymore. It was about destruction. And soon, Madison would discover that Jason's reach extended far beyond prison walls. The hospital had become a strange kind of cocoon for Madison Hayes. She was healing physically, her legs still heavy in a cast, but emotionally, the scars ran deeper. Every time the door opened, her body tensed, half expecting Jason's shadow to fall across the floor. Fear had a way of lingering, even when walls and police guards stood between her and danger. Yet amid the fear, Alexander Reed remained a constant presence. He never tried to erase her pain with empty promises. Instead, he listened, showing patience Madison hadn't experienced in years. Sometimes they sat together in silence, the weight of unspoken words heavier than any conversation. Other times, Alexander would share stories of his past, his failed marriage, his long nights of loneliness despite wealth and success. One evening, Madison finally spoke truth she had been holding in for too long. "I used to think I was strong," she confessed, her voice trembling. "But Jason, he took everything from me. My confidence, my laughter, even the way I see myself. I don't know if I'll ever be the same." Alexander's gaze softened, his voice steady. "You don't need to be the same, Madison. You need to be free. Free to rebuild, to find joy again. What Jason did to you doesn't define who you are. He tried to break you, but here you are, still standing. That's strength." Tears slipped down Madison's cheeks, but for the first time they weren't tears of despair. They were tears of release. She placed her hand over her belly, whispering, "I just want this child to know love. Not fear, not pain, just love." Alexander leaned closer, his tone almost a vow. "Then that's exactly what your child will know. I'll make sure of it." The sincerity in his words pierced her guarded heart. For weeks, Madison had wrestled with doubt, afraid to trust again, afraid that opening her heart would only lead to more disappointment. But in Alexander's eyes, she didn't see control or danger. She saw safety. She saw someone who valued her not as property, but as a person. Michael entered quietly, catching the tender moment. At first, his protective instincts flared. His sister had been hurt too much to risk being vulnerable again. But as he watched Madison smile faintly at Alexander's words, he realized something he hadn't seen in months: hope. Later, when Michael stepped outside to take a call, Madison turned to Alexander again. "Why me?" she asked softly. "You could be with anyone, someone whole, someone who isn't broken." Alexander reached out, carefully brushing a tear from her cheek. "Because you're not broken. You're brave. And because sometimes life puts people in our path, not when they're perfect, but when they need someone to believe in them. I believe in you, Madison." Her heart swelled with emotions she couldn't name. For the first time since her world had fallen apart, she felt the possibility of a future that wasn't defined by pain. But just as Madison began to let herself believe, a knock came at the door. A nurse entered with a message, her expression uneasy. "Madison, you need to know something. Jason hasn't stopped trying to reach you." And in that instant, Madison realized her battle for freedom was far from over. It was late afternoon when Michael Hayes walked into Madison's hospital room with a tense expression. He wasn't alone. Behind him, A woman in oversized sunglasses and a sleek black coat stepped inside, her heels clicking against the tile floor. Madison blinked in shock as the woman removed her glasses, revealing carefully painted makeup and eyes full of unease. "Madison," Michael began carefully, "this is Vanessa Price. She's connected to Jason." Madison stiffened, her breath catching. She recognized the name immediately. Vanessa was the mistress Jason had lied about, the woman he had promised the world to while tearing his wife apart. Madison's stomach churned with disgust. "Why is she here?" Vanessa raised her hands quickly. "Please, hear me out. I know you have no reason to trust me. I wouldn't trust me either. But Jason is dangerous, more dangerous than you realize. And if I don't tell you what I know, someone's going to get hurt." Alexander, who had been quietly near the window, stood protectively closer to Madison, his eyes narrowing. Michael folded his arms, keeping his cop instincts sharp. "Start talking," he ordered. Vanessa sighed, her voice trembling. "Jason's been planning something from inside prison. He has people on the outside, guys who owe him favors, guys who'll do anything for cash. He's been paying them through accounts I helped set up. I thought it was just about hiding gambling money, but it's worse. He's talking about revenge. He wants to scare Madison, ruin her life, even if he can't touch her himself." Madison felt the air leave her lungs. She had feared Jason's threats, but hearing Vanessa confirm them made the danger terrifyingly real. Her hand instinctively went to her belly, as if shielding her unborn child. Michael's jaw tightened. "Do you have proof?" Vanessa nodded and slid a flash drive across the table. "Bank records, emails, even recorded calls. I kept them. Insurance in case Jason ever turned on me. But after what he did to Madison, I can't stay quiet anymore. I'm done with him." Madison studied her carefully, torn between anger and reluctant gratitude. Vanessa had been part of Jason's betrayal, yet now she was offering the key to exposing him completely. Alexander picked up the flash drive, turning it over in his hand. "If this is real, it could bury Jason. He won't just sit in jail. He'll stay there for a very long time." Vanessa nodded firmly. "It's real, and he deserves every second of it." For the first time, Madison looked at Vanessa not just as the woman who had shared Jason's bed, but as someone who had also been manipulated, deceived, used. Different roles in the same nightmare. "I don't forgive you," Madison said quietly, her voice steady despite the tremor in her chest. "But if you're truly helping, then maybe something good can finally come out of all this." Vanessa lowered her gaze, ashamed. "I don't expect forgiveness. I just don't want him to destroy you the way he almost destroyed me." But what none of them realized was that Jason already suspected Vanessa's betrayal, and he was preparing to make her pay the ultimate price. News traveled quickly through Harris County Jail. Jason Miller had ways of finding out things he wasn't supposed to know. Guards whispered, inmates traded information like currency. And when word reached him that Vanessa Price had been seen meeting with Michael Hayes, Jason's blood boiled like lava. He slammed his fists against the cold metal table in the rec room, drawing stares from other inmates. "That ungrateful little traitor," he growled. "I gave her everything, and she dares to run to them?" Jason's cellmate, a wiry man with scars across his knuckles, smirked. "What did you expect? Loyalty? She's playing survival, same as everyone else. You can't control her from in here." Jason's eyes narrowed, his voice dropping into a dangerous whisper. "Watch me." That night, he used his one phone call. Vanessa picked up on the third ring, her voice wary. "Jason, you shouldn't be calling me." Jason's tone was venomous. "You met with Michael. Don't lie to me. Vanessa, do you think I don't know? Do you think I won't find out what you've done?" There was a pause on the other end before Vanessa answered, her voice shaking but firm. "I'm done being your puppet. You're toxic, Jason. You nearly killed your wife, and now you want to drag everyone else down with you. I'm not part of this anymore." Jason's laugh was cold, empty. "You think you can walk away? You think Madison's cop brother can protect you? You don't know me, Vanessa. I don't forgive, and I don't forget." She hung up before he could say more, but the damage was done. Jason's rage had crystallized into a plan. If Madison thought she had allies now, he would tear them away one by one, starting with Vanessa. Back in his cell, Jason scribbled notes furiously, passing them discreetly to an inmate with outside connections. "I want her scared," Jason ordered. "I don't care how. A break-in, a threat, a warning. Make her regret ever crossing me." The inmate pocketed the note, nodding slowly. "It'll cost you." Jason smirked, his voice dripping with arrogance. "Money's not the problem. She is." Meanwhile, Vanessa couldn't shake the chill of Jason's words. Though she had handed Michael the flash drive, she knew Jason wouldn't let betrayal slide. Every time her phone buzzed, every shadow outside her apartment, her heart leapt in terror. She had thought speaking out would free her, but instead, it felt like she had painted a target on her back. Michael noticed her fear when she came to the precinct the next day. "He called you, didn't he?" Vanessa nodded, her hands trembling. "He knows everything. He won't stop until someone gets hurt." Michael's jaw tightened. "Then we'll make sure it isn't you, or my sister." But Jason was patient. Rage gave him focus, and focus gave him power. From the darkness of his cell, he whispered a vow to himself, a vow that sent chills even through hardened criminals nearby. "If Madison thinks she can rebuild her life, I'll burn it all down first." The hospital stay was finally over. Madison was released into Michael's protective care, but she wasn't going back to the little house on Elmwood Drive. That place held too many ghosts, too many memories of pain. Instead, Alexander Reed offered a solution. His estate on the edge of Houston, a sprawling property with high walls, security gates, and peace Madison hadn't known in years. At first, she hesitated. Moving into the home of a billionaire felt overwhelming, like stepping into someone else's world. But when Alexander showed her the nursery he had quietly arranged, a soft pastel room filled with sunlight, rocking chairs and bookshelves, her heart cracked open. For once, the future didn't feel like a nightmare. It felt like possibility. Days melted into a routine that slowly healed her spirit. Madison sat in the garden with a cup of tea, Alexander beside her, both of them watching the koi fish glide across the pond. Sometimes they spoke of simple things, favorite movies, childhood memories, silly mistakes. Other times, silence said everything. Madison found herself laughing again, her laughter light and unguarded. One evening, as the Texas sky turned pink and gold, Madison whispered, "I don't remember the last time I felt safe like this." Alexander looked at her, his expression soft. "Safety isn't a luxury, Madison. It's what you deserve, you and your baby." Her hand instinctively went to her belly, feeling the gentle kick. "I want this child to grow up surrounded by love, not fear. I want them to know they're cherished." Alexander reached over, carefully taking her hand. "Then let's build that together." His words stirred something deep within her. It wasn't the dizzying infatuation she had once felt with Jason. This was steadier, stronger, rooted in respect and care. For the first time, Madison allowed herself to imagine a future where she wasn't just surviving, she was living. Michael noticed the change too. Watching his sister smile again filled him with relief. Still, his instincts as a cop and as a brother kept him on edge. "I don't want to rain on your happiness," he warned her one night. "But Jason isn't finished. He's dangerous, Maddie. Promise me you'll stay cautious." Madison nodded, though fear flickered in her eyes. She knew Michael was right. Jason's threats haunted her still, lurking like shadows at the edge of every joy. That night, as Madison prepared for bed, she stood by the window, gazing at the peaceful estate. Alexander's home was quiet, the gardens lit softly by lanterns, the world finally at rest. She whispered to her unborn baby, "Maybe this is where we'll find our forever." But as she drifted to sleep, her dreams weren't entirely peaceful. Jason's face appeared in flashes, his voice, his rage, his vow to never let her go. And while Madison embraced hope for the first time in years, Jason was already putting his plan into motion to shatter it all. The concrete walls of Harris County Jail might have held Jason Miller's body, but his mind clawed for freedom. He refused to accept that Madison was slipping away, that she was building a new life with another man. Each night he lay awake, the image of Madison smiling at Alexander Reed burning into his thoughts. Obsession was his fuel, and revenge was the only destination. Jason knew he couldn't act alone, but outside those walls he still had influence. He had debts owed, favors to call in, and desperate men willing to do anything for quick cash. All he needed was one willing hand. That hand came in the form of Ricky Torres, a petty criminal with a rap sheet longer than his arm. Ricky had once played cards with Jason in underground games, losing far more than he could afford. Jason had covered his debts back then, not out of kindness, but to own him later. Now, later had arrived. Jason leaned across the visitation glass, his voice low but sharp. "Ricky, I need you to do something for me. My wife, she's shacked up with some billionaire, living in his mansion like she's free. I want her reminded that she's not, that she'll never be." Ricky shifted uncomfortably. "You're asking for heat, Jason. That's a cop's sister. Messing with her is suicide." Jason's eyes narrowed, his tone turning icy. "You owe me, Ricky. Don't forget who saved your skin when those loan sharks were ready to bury you. You think you'd be breathing right now if it wasn't for me?" Ricky swallowed hard. Jason had a way of twisting the knife. "What do you want me to do?" Jason's lips curled into a sinister smile. "Simple. Watch her. Make her nervous. A broken window, a slashed tire, a note where she'll find it. Nothing big, yet. Just enough so she knows I'm still out here, even if I'm locked up. And if that billionaire gets in the way, remind him money can't protect everything." Ricky nodded reluctantly. Fear and debt chained him tighter than bars ever could. Back at Alexander's estate, Madison was finally starting to feel like she could breathe again. She spent afternoons in the garden, evenings reading in the nursery, her brother and Alexander always nearby. But late one night, when Michael went to his car, he noticed something that made his blood run cold. A jagged slash across one of the tires. His instincts screamed danger. He searched the grounds, flashlight scanning the shadows. That's when he found it. An envelope tucked beneath the windshield wiper. Inside was a note scrawled in Jason's messy handwriting. "You can hide behind walls, but walls fall. I'm still watching." Michael's jaw clenched. He stormed inside, showing the note to Madison and Alexander. Madison's face went pale, her hands instinctively wrapping around her belly. Alexander's eyes hardened, his protective resolve stronger than ever. "This ends now," Michael growled. "Jason may think he still controls you, Maddie, but he just made the biggest mistake of his life." Because Jason didn't realize his threats had only united Madison, Michael, and Alexander into a force stronger than he ever imagined. Vanessa Price had tried to move on after handing Michael the flash drive. She thought exposing Jason's secrets would free her from his grip, but freedom came with fear. Every time she walked down a dim street, every time a car slowed near her apartment, she felt his shadow pressing close. Jason might be behind bars, but his rage traveled far beyond prison walls. Her fears weren't paranoia. Jason had already issued Ricky Torres his next command. "She betrayed me," Jason snarled during a whispered call from the prison phones. "She ran to Madison and that cop brother. She thinks she's clever. I want her to learn what happens to traitors." Ricky hesitated. "Jason, she's not part of this anymore. Maybe let it go. Focus on your wife." Jason slammed his fist against the glass, his eyes burning with hate. "Don't tell me what to do. Vanessa's mine to deal with. Make her pay." And so Ricky obeyed. That night, Vanessa returned home to find her apartment door slightly ajar. Panic surged through her chest. She had locked it that morning. She was sure of it. Slowly, she pushed it open. The lights were off, but on the kitchen counter lay a single red rose. Attached to it was a note written in Jason's scrawl. "Betrayal has a price." Vanessa's breath caught. She stumbled back, slamming the door shut, fumbling for her phone. Her hands shook as she dialed Michael's number. "He knows, Michael. Jason knows I went to you. Someone's been here. I don't feel safe." Within 20 minutes, Michael arrived with 2 officers. He swept the apartment, but whoever had been inside was long gone. He found the rose, the note, and fresh boot prints on the balcony. His stomach turned. Jason's reach was real, and Vanessa was the newest target. "You're coming with me," Michael said firmly. "You're not staying here another night." Vanessa's tough exterior cracked as she sank onto the couch, tears spilling down her cheeks. "I thought I could just hand you the evidence and be done. I didn't know he'd still haunt me like this." Michael crouched down, his tone softening. "Jason feeds on fear. That's all he has left. But we're not going to let him win. You're safer with us than alone." Reluctantly, Vanessa agreed. Michael drove her to Alexander's estate, where Madison was recovering. When Madison saw Vanessa step through the door, her guard went up immediately. But the fear in Vanessa's eyes told her everything. This wasn't the same confident mistress who had once stolen Jason's attention. This was a woman running for her life. "Jason sent someone after her," Michael explained, showing Madison the note. "He's not just after you anymore. He's lashing out at anyone who stands against him. Madison's heart pounded, her hand tightening on the armrest of her chair. Jason's hatred was spreading like wildfire, threatening to consume everything in its path. She had hoped exposing his lies would be the end, but now the danger was closer than ever. And as Vanessa joined their fragile circle of safety, none of them realized Jason's plan was building toward one explosive move that could shatter all of their lives. The day of the trial arrived with heavy clouds hanging low over Houston, as though the sky itself understood the weight of what was about to unfold. The courthouse buzzed with reporters, cameras flashing as they jostled for photos of the disgraced Jason Miller. He was led inside in shackles, his once confident swagger reduced to a scowl. Still, his eyes burned with fury, darting toward the people who had gathered to testify against him. Madison entered the courtroom slowly, supported by Michael on one side and Alexander on the other. Her casted leg made each step difficult, but her head was held high. For months, Jason had tried to crush her spirit, to make her cower. Today, she refused to bend. This was not just about her. It was about her unborn child, about finally breaking free. Jason sneered as she passed, muttering under his breath, "You'll regret this, Madison." Michael immediately leaned closer to his sister. "Ignore him," he whispered. "He's powerless now." The judge called the court to order. Witness after witness painted the picture of Jason's downfall. Neighbors who had heard Madison's screams that night, paramedics who had carried her broken body out of the house, doctors who described her injuries. Each testimony chipped away at Jason's facade, leaving him exposed as the violent man he truly was. Then it was Vanessa's turn. She took the stand, her hands trembling as she adjusted the microphone. Jason's glare cut into her, but she pushed past her fear. "Jason Miller promised me the world," she admitted, but behind closed doors he was reckless, violent, obsessed with control. He hid money in secret accounts, used it to pay men for intimidation, and when I tried to walk away, he threatened my life. The courtroom gasped as Vanessa revealed the red rose and the note Jason had left for her. The prosecutor held up the evidence, the scrawled handwriting undeniable. Jason shifted in his seat, his face contorted with rage. Finally, Madison was called to testify. As she took the stand, the room fell silent. Her voice shook at first, but grew stronger with every word. "I believed Jason when he said he loved me. I forgave him when he hurt me. I thought if I stayed, I could change him. But love isn't supposed to break your bones. Love isn't supposed to leave you afraid for your life, or your child's." That night, when he raised that pipe, I realized Jason didn't want a wife. He wanted control, and I refused to be controlled anymore. Tears welled in the eyes of jurors. Even the judge's expression softened. Madison's courage resonated like truth that could not be silenced. Alexander sat in the gallery, his heart swelling with pride and protectiveness. He had seen her at her weakest, but here she was, stronger than ever, refusing to be silenced. Jason slammed his fists on the table, shouting, "She's lying! They're all lying!" The bailiff restrained him, dragging him back into his seat. His mask of control was gone, replaced by the frantic desperation of a man watching his world crumble. And when the prosecutor revealed Jason's secret bank records, the ones Vanessa had handed over, the courtroom knew his fate was sealed. The courtroom was silent except for the steady ticking of the clock on the wall. Every eye was fixed on the jury as they filed back into the box, their faces solemn. Jason Miller sat rigidly at the defense table, sweat gathering on his brow. For once, his arrogant smirk was gone, replaced by the twitch of a man who finally realized he was cornered. Madison sat in the front row, Alexander on one side, Michael on the other. Her hands clutched tightly together in her lap, knuckles white. She prayed for justice, not just for herself, but for the child kicking gently inside her. The judge cleared his throat. "Has the jury reached a verdict?" The foreman stood. "We have, Your Honor." Madison held her breath as the verdict was read. On the charge of aggravated assault against Madison Hayes, we find the defendant, Jason Miller, guilty. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Jason's face twisted, his eyes narrowing into slits as he glared at Madison. She sat taller, refusing to look away. On the charge of reckless endangerment of an unborn child, guilty. Madison felt tears sting her eyes. She gripped Michael's hand, her heart pounding with relief. And on the charges of financial fraud, intimidation, and conspiracy, guilty on all counts. The weight of the words crushed whatever fight Jason had left. He slammed his fist on the table, shouting, "This is a setup! They're all against me! I'm not guilty!" The judge's gavel banged sharply. "Order in the court." Bailiffs restrained Jason as he continued to rage, his voice hoarse. "Madison, you'll regret this. You can't take everything from me." But even as he shouted, his power drained away. No one listened. No one believed him. His words, once weapons, were now empty echoes. The judge's voice cut through the chaos. "Jason Miller, you are hereby sentenced to 35 years in state prison, with no possibility of parole for the first 20. You will answer for your crimes." A heavy silence followed, broken only by the sound of Jason being dragged away in shackles. His eyes locked on Madison one last time, filled with hatred and despair. She met his gaze calmly, her tears finally falling, but not from fear, from release. For the first time in years, Madison felt free. Alexander reached for her hand, his grip steady, reassuring. "It's over," he whispered. Michael's voice was firmer. "No, it's justice. He'll never hurt you again." Around them, reporters scribbled furiously, cameras clicked, and whispers filled the room. But Madison didn't care about the noise. She closed her eyes, inhaling deeply, feeling the weight lift from her chest. Jason had lost everything: his wife, his mistress, his freedom, his power. Alone, caged, abandoned, he would spend decades haunted by the life he had destroyed with his own hands. And as Madison stepped out of the courthouse into the sunlight, she realized her true story wasn't ending. It was just beginning. Months passed after the trial, and the seasons shifted. The chill of winter gave way to the warmth of spring, a season of renewal that mirrored Madison Hayes's life. Jason Miller was locked away, his voice silenced by concrete walls and iron bars. For Madison, each day became brighter, freer, safer. At Alexander Reed's estate, she found not just shelter, but a home. The sprawling gardens, once intimidating, became her sanctuary. She walked slowly along the stone paths, her hand resting on her belly, whispering dreams to her unborn child. For the first time in years, her words weren't laced with fear. They were filled with hope. Michael visited often, never far from his sister's side. His duty as a brother hadn't ended with Jason's arrest. If anything, it had grown stronger. But now his watchful eyes softened when he saw Madison laugh again, saw color return to her cheeks. He even allowed himself to smile when Alexander stood beside her, not as a savior, but as a partner who respected her strength. The day finally came. In the quiet of a hospital room, under the steady care of doctors and nurses, Madison gave birth to a healthy baby boy. Tears of joy streamed down her face as she held her son for the first time, his tiny fingers curling around hers. The pain, the scars, the nights of terror, all of it seemed to fade in that single moment. Michael stood at the window, wiping at his eyes when he thought no one was looking. Alexander stayed close, his hand resting gently on Madison's shoulder, his eyes filled with awe as he gazed at the baby. "He's perfect," Alexander whispered. Madison smiled through tears. "He's free. That's all I ever wanted for him." In the weeks that followed, life blossomed in ways Madison had never dared imagine. The nursery Alexander had prepared came alive with soft lullabies, colorful mobiles, and the gentle creak of the rocking chair. Madison would sit there at night, her baby nestled in her arms, watching the stars through the wide windows. Each star felt like a promise of a future finally within reach. Alexander's role grew naturally, not forced, not rushed. He was patient, kind, and steady. A man who showed love not with grand declarations but with daily actions. He changed diapers, sang lullabies off-key, and held Madison's hand during sleepless nights. Slowly, love bloomed between them. A love built not on control or fear, but on respect and devotion. Jason faded into the past, a shadow locked away where he could harm no one. His mistress had disappeared from the spotlight, and his name became a cautionary tale whispered in hushed tones. Meanwhile, Madison's name became synonymous with strength. Standing in the garden one sunny afternoon, Madison watched her son giggle in Alexander's arms while Michael teased him with a toy badge. Her heart swelled. She had walked through fire, but she had not been consumed. She had rebuilt, not just for herself, but for her child. And as Madison whispered to her baby, "We are safe, we are loved, and we are free," she finally believed it, with every fiber of her being. All right, my friend, so the story has come full circle. And if you're still here, watching and listening until this very moment, then I know something inside this journey touched your heart too. Maybe it reminded you of pain you've endured, or maybe it gave you hope for the future. The truth is, life will test us, but as the Stoics remind us, we cannot control what happens to us, only how we respond. Madison's story shows us that strength isn't never falling. It's standing up again, for yourself, for your family, and for the life you deserve. Healing takes courage, and choosing love over fear is the bravest act of all. So if this touched you, do me a favor. Like this video, share it with someone who might need the reminder that they are stronger than their struggles. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss the stories that remind us of our own resilience. Because together we heal.